She was taken into a house and brutally sexually assaulted on Saturday evening.
So she was taken into the house, sexually assaulted.
There was a mattress in the garage.
There was a mattress. Do you know, was there more than one man?
Three.
3 men.
Last night saw significant sustained disorder in Ballymena. This violence was clearly racially motivated and targeted at our minority ethnic community and the police. It was racist thuggery, pure and simply, and any attempt to justify or explain it as something else is misplaced.
I was in Ireland on Saturday, flew home right away, but as I was making my way home, in Northern Ireland, which is actually part of the United Kingdom, but contiguous with the Republic of Ireland, in Ballymena, a town of about 30,000 people, there was allegedly a rape. And the rapists were migrant men by allegation. They appeared in court and they had translators to the Romanian language. They were allegedly Roma gypsies. Northern Ireland and the rest of Ireland are obviously culturally similar in many important ways. There are some differences, particularly between Protestants and Catholics, but I don't think those are important here other than in one way, which is that all Irish have been closer to violence, I put it to you, than any Canadian has. Ireland rebelled against the United Kingdom about 100 years ago. That was a full-fledged rebellion. And then there were, quote, troubles in the north until very recently. Those troubles included bombings, shootings, kidnappings. I'm not here to comment on those, but you can sense that rebel spirit living on. And whereas in Canada, it would be unthinkable to call for political violence, I've heard it a couple of times in my visits to Ireland itself, that violence is not wanted, but it is a last resort. You don't hear it in a blatant way, but there is a whiff of it from time to time. And you see that young people are familiar with throwing rocks and bottles. They wear balaclavas or a face mask. It's not a COVID thing, I can assure you. I saw a bit of that when I was in Dublin. There's this low-income area called Coolock that the police were insistent they were going to put 500 military-age migrant men in an old paint factory. And the locals wouldn't have it. The most interesting thing I saw is that there were teenage boys who were there covering their faces, hurling projectiles at police while their mums and dads were there with approval. Like, it's the kind of place where fighting is part of the family tradition. And I'm not painting with a broad brush. I'm just saying that is something you don't typically see in a place like Canada. And the police are pretty muscular too. Just yesterday, I think it was, the police in Northern Ireland were showing off their new water cannon truck. I can't remember the last time such a riot control truck was used in Canada. Maybe it would have been during the trucker convoy, and that in itself was the first time in a generation. I think in Ireland, especially in Northern Ireland, they plan to use it. And obviously, they plan to use it against the ethnic Irish themselves. So back to what happened on Saturday night. There's been a series of rapes in this small town. And like I say, there are two minors who were charged with sexual assault who are Roma gypsies. And I've seen pictures of one of the men on social media, but I can't confirm it, so I don't want to show the picture of one of the accused without knowing for sure that he is the guy that it's claimed he is. But there's a taunting to it, as is sometimes the case with gypsy migrants. And it was so shocking, the rape of a young girl in this small, close-knit town that was so conspicuously done by migrants, that more than 2,500 local people in a city or in a town just 10 times that size took to the streets, absolutely overwhelming the streets of this small town. Very solemn, very sober, very angry, but not a wild anger, a determined anger. Here, let me just show you some videos for a bit. I was riveted by this, and I could feel the emotion coming through the camera.
She was taken into a house and brutally sexually assaulted on Saturday evening.
So she was taken into the house, sexually assaulted.
There was a mattress in the garage.
There was a mattress. Do you know, was there more than one man?
3.
3 men. Right. So, so you're here. Fair play to you. I can't believe the crowd has come out to support these guys. You know what I mean? It's absolutely immense. There's no flags. There's no shouting. It's totally respect. It's totally respectful.
It's not about. It's a child has been hurt, and
it's 3 now. It's 3 incidents.
2 weeks ago it was brushed under the carpet. I wasn't aware of the one before that.
Yeah.
But the child 2 weeks ago was the same age, and it's absolutely disgusting.
Right,
absolutely disgusting. I don't want my kids going anywhere.
Now, this happened quite quickly, and local police were obviously quickly overwhelmed. It took some time for the heavier riot police to come into town with their big trucks, but not before some of the youths, with their faces covered, they know what they're doing in Northern Ireland, sacked the apartments that they believed were the homes for these gypsies, sacked them, burned them, overturned vehicles. It was very interesting to watch what was going on. And I'm not talking about the violence itself. I'm talking about the mass march on the street. Can you tell me the last time in Canada that there was hundreds, let alone thousands of people spontaneously marching in the street about anything, let alone the rape of a young girl? There was a solidarity there that I don't think you find in Canada. Maybe I'm not remembering something. And I think it goes to Ireland's nature. By far most Irish have been there for centuries. They're part of a family. They're part of a clan, you could say. They're united, I suppose, by religion too. There is that great divide between Catholics and Protestants, but you belong there in Ireland. Now, maybe that's suffocating sometimes. Maybe you want to break out of your rut and be someone who you could be but aren't. I suppose that's one of the things about a very intense family, is that you have to play a role. But one of the benefits of being in such an intense family as an ethnically homogenous country is that sense of belonging. 2,500 people marched in grave solidarity with these violated girls against an outside threat. And it reminded me of the last time I saw such a thing, and it was in this case in Sunderland, near Newcastle in the United Kingdom, when a young mother was raped, again by migrant men. And the whole community in Sunderland went out for a march. And actually, we participated with Tommy Robinson. More than 100,000 people signed a petition in support of Chelsea. Let me just show you a little bit about what that was like in this very poor, ethnically homogenous town called Sunderland that had been invaded by foreign migrants foisted upon them.
We want to hand you here, there's over 50,000 signatures demanding justice and action against Muslim men who are raping girls in the city. And again, that's the start. Chelsea.
There's an ethnic homogeneity in Sunderland and in Ballymena. In the north of Ireland, split between Protestant and Catholic, I suppose, but those differences between Protestant and Catholic, I would imagine they pale next to the common revulsion at the rape culture that has been brought into Ireland and into the UK. I think that is the reason why Ireland is reacting to mass immigration and Canada is quite passive about it. I felt it when I was in Dundrum. Remember that tiny town of, 180 or 200 people where the government suddenly said, surprise, you're taking 240 military age migrant men. I remember when I was in that town, I was only in that town for a few hours, and we stopped in to basically a gas station convenience store. And we stopped and we took some what we call B-roll, some background footage. And anyone who came by stopped and said, "Who are you? What you doing?" Not in an attacky way, and not so much in, like, not as an attack, I mean, and not so much in a gossipy way, but just we're all looking out for each other. And we want to make sure that the stranger in Dundrum is not here for bad reasons, because there were some coming. And they were only appeased when we gave them the name of the matriarch of Dundrum who had welcomed us in. That's something about small towns. And I suppose you have that in small town Canada. I suppose you have that in some town in Saskatchewan, and some town in Alberta, some town in Ontario, where people all know each other, and when people have been there for decades and someone who's only been there 10 years is still called a newcomer. There's something wonderful about living in a community like that. And so when that town is suddenly told they're going to be a minority in their own place, they don't like it much. Here's what Dundrum said.
My name is Fiona Kennedy. I'm a very ordinary mother. I live here locally in Dundrum, and I'm here with a group of people. We're the most ordinary people that you could possibly meet. We find ourselves in an extraordinary situation, and really we're standing to protect our hotel, our beautiful hotel here, Dundrum House Hotel, our golf club, and our community.
Now, I had never heard of Dundrum until yesterday. I looked it up, and it only has about 200 people. And I understand that this facility, this gorgeous, beautiful hotel and country club, could theoretically sleep up to 500 people. What do you know about the contract that the owner of this facility has to house asylum seekers and refugees? What information do you have?
Well, unfortunately, we've very little information. Now, we have submitted a request for information under the Freedom of Information Act. I'm not sure if the time on that is up, but we've had no information back yet. We would like to get sight of the contract, but nobody's forthcoming on that.
And has the owner of the hotel been communicative at all?
Not in the slightest, no. He hasn't engaged with us at all.
And what is the government entity that's involved? Is it just the national government, or are there any local governments involved?
Well, really, this has been driven by national government, the Department of Integration, and we do have local government here in Tipperary in Ireland as well. We have some local councillors who are working on our behalf, working with us. We have one local Tipperary TD member of our Parliament, just to translate it to Canadian, and here is actually the owner is just about to pass. The owner is just passing.
I'll have to go and talk to him. What's his name?
His name is Jeff Leo. Yeah.
And I understand he's from away, is that right?
Yeah, I understand he's American. I've actually never met Jeff. So that's my first time seeing him. That hasn't been a photograph.
He certainly sped by.
Yeah,
He hasn't had any community town halls. Has he sat down with the media at all?
Not to my knowledge, he hasn't.
I'm guessing you would know.
We would know. And he hasn't engaged with the community at all. We've had 2 public meetings, both very heavily attended. And
I saw that solidarity at the big march in Cork on Saturday. And I think, how come we don't have those marches in Canada? I'd say there was about 4,000 marchers in Cork, a city of 250,000. There'd been 50,000 in Dublin, a city with, 1.5 million in the whole area. I doubt you would get 20 people marching in Toronto. We don't have the same community in our big cities. We're becoming a country of strangers. We brought in so many migrants so quickly that those bonds they're not there. Do you know who your neighbors are? Maybe if you live in a small town or in the country you do. But if you live in Toronto or Vancouver or Montreal or Ottawa or even parts of Calgary or Edmonton, I bet you don't know who's in your neighborhood anymore. We're a country of strangers. We've been desensitized to people who are not only different from us and far away from us, but they've brought different cultures along with them. Now, our country, before it was multicultural, had madness and had drunkenness and had crime. But I think the difference is now that we've been atomized. I think COVID helped cut the bonds of society amongst us as well. We were cut off from people of any background. We were told to live through our computer screens and our phones. COVID was the dream for maybe many large corporations. It benefited banks and cell phone companies and landlords and DoorDash that works on migrant labor. But I think in some parts of the world, they still have community. That's a high trust society. But look at the low trust or something. Look at this. Yeah, that's newcomers partying in a graveyard in Ireland. There's certain parts of a cultural identity that are evident and some that are sort of like the 6th, 7th of an iceberg that's underwater. You don't really see them all the time until suddenly they're there. Look, I am against the violence that is happening in this small town in Northern Ireland. But what happens when the state fails to protect its own people? Or let me phrase that in a different way. I'm against violence in Northern Ireland, but is the state against it? And if so, why has it brought into Northern Ireland people who are so evidently not a fit? There was racism in Ballymena, and it was allegedly these foreign migrants who chose to rape an Irish national. They didn't rape someone else who was Roma. The rape was racist, as most rapes in the UK are. Ask Majid Nawaz about the preponderance of Pakistani Muslim men committing rapes in the United Kingdom.
It is an absolute disgrace. People have cared for their reputations over the safety of children in this country being raped and drugged and passed around like meat because of the bigotry and the prejudices of these Pakistani Muslim men who are looking down on these children as less than, as inferior, as some form of infidel that doesn't deserve honour or dignity. And I address you now here, oh woke left wing. You talk about believing the victim. Look it up. Go to your smartphone and Google Ella Hill. She writes a piece in The Independent in which she describes the religious extremist terminology her abusers were using as they were sexually exploiting her as a child, in which she talks of how they called her an infidel and how they abused her race and her lack of Islamic faith and justified treating her in this way because they viewed her as less than because they believe themselves to be Muslim supremacists. Don't tell me that their Muslim identity had nothing to do with this. I have lived and breathed this community all of my life. I can guarantee you that it's not the cause, but a factor in the way in which these girls was treated was the culture of these men, and as part of that culture is their religious attitude towards non-Muslims. And that is the reason that you see almost exclusively that they are men like me, Pakistani, British, Muslim. Most of them, all of them Muslims, almost all Pakistani Muslims. And the victims, almost all underaged white girls.
So that's what started happening yesterday, and I was riveted by it on social media. But listen to what the police had to say today.
Last night saw significant sustained disorder in Ballymena. This violence was clearly racially motivated and targeted at our minority ethnic community and the police. It was racist thuggery, pure and simply, and any attempt to justify or explain it as something else is misplaced.
That's Assistant Chief Constable Ryan Henderson of the Police Service of Northern Ireland. He's doing the Southport playbook. If you don't know what Southport is, it happened last year in the United Kingdom when a convert to Islam named Axel Rudakabana went into a Taylor Swift themed girls party with a knife and just stabbed and stabbed and stabbed, murdering several of the girls. It set off riots, it set off outrage against migrants. Rudakabana was arrested. He's since gone on to commit more violence in prison. But what was fascinating is the whole thing was blamed not on the UK's failure to vet migrants and not on radical Islam, but it was blamed on the far right. And Keir Starmer set up 24-hour-a-day courts that prosecuted not necessarily people who were violent, but people who said mean things on social media. And that's just what happened again in Northern Ireland. They're running that same playbook. They just called the grieving community racist. And I'm sure they're going to lock up anyone who talks about it. Now, earlier today, we spoke with Richard Inman, who's a friend of mine who I met in the United Kingdom. And we had a good talk about it, and he gave us a briefing on what happened last night, and I'll play that for you in a moment. But after that interview, it was clear that things were getting bigger and more intense. And we have more footage for you since we've spoken with Richard. Will the United Kingdom and Ireland continue this mad experiment of bringing in people who are culturally not a fit, legally not a fit, often who don't speak English, often in some cases hate the United Kingdom? I doubted when the people of Coolock said they could stop the plantation in their neighborhood. I was startled by the kids throwing things, but I think the fighting Irish spirit might well succeed despite their government. And for anyone who abhors violence, including riots and arson and the kind of things that have happened in this Northern Ireland town, it is not ideal that violence is the way that this will be stopped. But when the government is at war with its own people, when the government refuses to stop the floodgates of foreigners, unvetted foreigners, when the government literally escorts in boats across the English Channel coming to the UK with illegal immigrants, when nothing seems to stop it and the government is deaf to the pleas of the people, what would you expect is going to happen? Oh, hi, it's Ezra Levant here in Toronto with an important message because we need your help. Independent journalism in Canada is under attack. Government censors, big tech deplatformers, and the dying legacy media are all working together to maintain exclusive control on the information you receive. They don't want you to hear other voices like ours, and they really don't want you to be informed and to think for yourself. That's why the work we do here at Rebel News is so important. Our on-the-ground reporting, independent news shows, and special content you won't find anywhere else. It's all designed to give you trustworthy information and alternative viewpoints so you can decide for yourself. We don't get government money, and we are not owned by some big global conglomerate. We're funded by people just like you, so please support independent journalism and help us continue our work by subscribing and becoming a Rebel News Plus member today, right here on the page. Go to rebelnewsplus.com. Members get instant access to all of our shows, invitations to exclusive events, and access to our premium content like live event footage and documentaries you won't see anywhere else. Only Rebel News Plus members can join the conversation by participating in the comments section of our new website. That way you can have your say too. More than anything, though, you'll be able to take pride in supporting real, honest journalism, and you'll help our talented team continue to do the work to push back on the establishment. We really can use your help. We need it, in fact. So thank you, and enjoy Rebel News Plus.